Welcome to the series of the program on postgraduate diploma in mental health. I am going to deal to the series of sessions which will be dealing with the Eastern and Western concept of mind. This is related to the course on fundamentals of mental health, which is MPC 51. So, prior to going to the concept of mind, it is necessary that we understand the roots of our system, the roots from where the knowledge has actually arisen. The Indian knowledge system has its own strong base, and we do need to understand what exactly has led to the concept, to the development of the mind concept as well as the concept of self in psychology. Now, prior to that, it is also actually needed to understand that Indian knowledge system is a very broad range. It is an umbrella term, and there are several disciplines which are actually dealing with, which are a part of this Indian knowledge system. Prior to going to the further explanation, we do need to understand what exactly is the meaning of this Indian knowledge system. As you can see in the slide, it refers to the process through which any society, over here, the Indian society, collects, shares, uses, and stores knowledge, primarily in the fields of philosophy, education, science, health, and other related fields. Well, now if we are talking about other related fields, all these fields are interrelated, and of course, psychology is everywhere. So we do need to understand that the process includes knowledge-based system, which was also helpful in these several fields. Of course, it is also required to understand that this Indian knowledge system, in short IKS, is a traditional way of learning and is rooted from the ancient texts and the oral traditions. Now, you need to understand, we need to understand what are these traditional texts and what exactly is the oral tradition. Now, these traditional texts actually refers to way back manuscripts and way back scriptures referring to Vedas, Upanishads, Darshanas, and Ayurveda, as well as yoga. Talking about the oral stories, the epics like Panchatantra and several other epics which were traditionally orally spoken, which were orally used as preaches, as lessons for students, for the disciples, for the citizens. They were also used as moral-based education in order to give a practical knowledge on how to deal with people, how to deal with society, and how to act in society. Not only this, these particular traditional scriptures and oral stories also gave a way out to develop knowledge, to develop psychology, to develop context related to mental health, and also related to the cultural values that should be imbibed amongst individuals. Now, while talking about Indian context, we do need to understand that there are several texts, several scriptures which are still unexplored, which are being decoded, which are being uncoded, which are being unlearned, so that it gives us a new glimpse of what was already mentioned in our texts and scriptures. Many things like the invention of zero, the invention of many satellites and all, these has already been mentioned in the text. Now, this particular Indian knowledge system is a basis that provides platform to understand our culture, our traditional knowledge, and also the ancient thought process and creativity. Now, these are the things that are actually still relevant and can be employed in our normal day-to-day life system. Now, While talking about the Indian knowledge system, we also need to understand what exactly is the relevance of this Indian knowledge system. Now, if we go back to the traditional system, practices, to the traditional scriptures, we do see that there are several discourse, several texts, several dialogue writings which highlight that there existed a Guru Shishya Parampara since the beginning. And this Guru Shishya Parampara was followed very religiously, and it implied that the students or the disciple follow what the Guru taught. And the preachings, the teachings, the philosophies of these gurus not only had implications in the previous times, it still holds an equal importance, and it still gives several information to sort out problems, and it is going to help, still going to help in several decision making issues. So the Eastern concept of mind, the Eastern perspective of the knowledge system is equally potent and equally implyable to the current knowledge system as well as to the current society. The second relevance that can be seen, that can be understood, is that the texture, the knowledge system had a spiritual base. Spiritual over here refers to the core belief system of individuals towards understanding the purpose of life, that is why I am here in this world, the values that needs to be imbibed among individuals, and the principles that needs to be followed in life. So, the Indian knowledge system guided individuals and can still guide individuals towards personal growth, emotional well-being, and moral decision making. Over here, we do need to add that the Indian knowledge system was and is still very useful for understanding the relevance of self, for understanding the relevance of the existential society, and also to how to deal with society. Now, as mentioned earlier, this particular system, the IKS system, is an interdisciplinary system. Now, as mentioned previously also, that this knowledge system refers to an umbrella system in which comes several other subjects, several other disciplines like economics, like history, like psychology, like medical sciences, and like life sciences or ecological environmental sciences. Now, these interdisciplinary subjects, the knowledge system is not delimited to any particular subject specific, and it consists of a mixture, an amalgamation of several subjects that can still help in solving complex issues, that can help us in understanding towards learning, thinking, problem solving, as well as decision making. Now, learning, as we know, is a relatively permanent event. Now, what exactly that refers to? That learning can always be unlearned to relearn. So, getting a knowledge is not a fixed knowledge. It should be flexible in nature, and there should be a context where things can be relearned, maybe on basis of experience, maybe on basis of our readings, maybe on basis of our knowledge system. So IKS has been that flexible that it tells us on how to unlearn to relearn, and on how to think what can be a constructive thinking, because human cannot stay in isolation. Even when they are in isolation, even when they are sitting idle, their mind continues to be active. Now, this active mind should have thoughts that are constructive in nature, because destruction can lead to nowhere. So construction, problem solving, decision making, all the mental concepts, the concepts of mind should be constructive in nature, and IKS emphasizes on that. Also, IKS is a pro-environmental concept. Now, it guides individuals towards their actions. What should they enact so that they can promote ecological sustainability and minimize the negative impacts of the particular pro-environmental aspects. Also, while mentioning the relevance, we do need to understand what exactly are the characteristic features of the Indian knowledge system. Well, as mentioned, it gives some spiritual information. It includes some spiritual wisdom. Now, while wondering on how to deal with, how to develop the concept of self, how to understand what exactly is life, why do we need to act, all these are included within the context, within the scriptures of the Indian knowledge system. So, it deals with the Indian knowledge system deals with concepts like Atma. Atma over here refers to self, me, Brahman, which refers to the universal consciousness, my understanding towards the universe, how well aware am I towards the universal facts, karma. How do I deal with my actions? How do I understand others' actions? And how do I forgo and forgive others' actions as well? It also deals with moksha. Moksha over here refers to liberalism, liberation. How do we get a liberation from our birth is one of the aspects which is very nicely mentioned in the Indian knowledge system. Therefore, the Indian knowledge system not only talks about the self, not only talks about how to remain healthy physically as well as mentally, it also promotes spiritual practices and beliefs. One very wonderful characteristic of the Indian knowledge system is that it is diverse in philosophy. The Indian knowledge system includes so many scriptures and texts which has the philosophy of diverse preachers, of teachers, of gurus belonging to several philosophical schools. Now, the schools like Buddhism, Jainism, Yoga, Nyaya, Vedanta, these philosophies had their own unique way of understanding reality and their unique way of understanding existence. So, we can see how broad is the Indian knowledge system, and if you are stuck at any problem, any decision that is required to be taken, these scriptures are actual guides and they direct us on how to sort it out, how to get it done. So beyond the other thinkers, beyond the psychologists of the Western context, Indian context or the Eastern concept were well versed even prior to the development of other places, other knowledges and other systems. So this particular Indian knowledge system also can be said to boast the practicality. It is a practical knowledge. It is not that has no evidence or proof. What in today's date we call as scientific knowledge is already imbibed in the Indian knowledge system. Now, if we talk about practicality, despite modernization, these traditions still remain relevant. They foster intellectual discourse. They can be used for educational pursuits, and they are still holding our prior culture. They are the preservatives of the cultures, values, beliefs, and ideas of our prior thinkers. So this particular knowledge system is actually a diverse practicality based, implication based knowledge. As mentioned to you earlier, that this is totally scientific in nature. It is not that it doesn't need any evidence. The knowledge that was mentioned in these scriptures were already evidence based, were already on basis of experiences, were already on basis of philosophical thoughts that had a certain scientific basis. Now, the ancient Indian achievements in maths, in astronomy, medicine and metallurgy including the invention of zero and the contributions to algebra, can not be neglected. They were the ones which were already mentioned in our text, in our scriptures, and these particular fields already existed at that time. Now, at present, you may have heard of the term ergonomics. Ergonomics refers to designing of infrastructure. It refers to designing of the situations, the positions of seating furnitures, and how to make the people seated so that there's a particular degree, a particular angle. Even now when I am speaking to you, even now when I am talking to you virtually, there are different angles that have been maintained so that my voice comes to you very clearly. I am visible to you very clearly. This is all on basis of ergonomics. It is a field which tells you to the proportion that is required for a proper functioning of a system, of a particular infrastructure, of a particular company, of a particular organization, or a particular individual. Now, this ergonomics already existed. It was already mentioned in our Indian knowledge system, and it still holds importance and can be used for current basis. Also, it is worth mentioning that the Indian knowledge system is an amalgamation, it is an integration of cultural values. The festivals that have been mentioned in the prior scriptures, they show how colorful, how delighted, how nicely the festivals were celebrated. The music, the dance, the rituals, as can be seen in the paintings, as is reflected in the text and the scriptures, they showcase how spirituality and something uniqueness were in a fusion mode, how they were mixed, how amalgamated they were. That is, tradition was maintained along with modernization, and it still holds importance, the perfect thing that is to be mentioned. Now, let us go further to the Eastern perspective. Let us see what were there in the Indian knowledge system. Now, the Eastern concept reflected on mind, learning, belief system, and let us see what exactly were those belief systems, what exactly were included in the learning system, and what were the philosophy of these textures, these texts, these scriptures. In the series of the different concepts, first comes the Vedas. We do need to understand, you might have heard about the different Vedas, but let us see how they actually also focused upon development of the concept of mind. That is, how mind can be constructively developed, how self-growth can be maintained, and how individuals can deal with society in a more fruitful way. So in this hierarchy, while talking about Rig Veda, the Vedas include Rig Veda, Samveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. So now let us talk about the Rig Veda, which is said to be the oldest of the Vedas. It actually consists of hymns, the mantras that were dedicated to various deities. Now, the scriptures reflect that since earlier, we did believe in nature form deities like Agni, Indra, and Varuna. And still, these are being religiously followed, are being religiously worshipped. The Rig Veda emphasized on rituals, on prayers, and praises for cosmic forces. So, Rig Veda holds to be the oldest of Vedas, but it still is a guide on how to deal with rituals, what should be the prayers and the praises for the cosmic forces, the forces that cannot be seen but can be felt. Samaveda consists of melodies and chants derived from the Rig Veda for the users in rituals and sacrifices. So, Samveda actually focused on musical aspects and Vedic recitations, what should be the way of reciting the Vedas, what should be the musical rhyme, rhythm, hymn of these Vedas can be seen in the Samveda. Now, talking about the third Veda, that is the Yajur Veda, it contains the prose and verse formulas that were used by priests during Vedic rituals and ceremonies. Now, Yajur Veda is divided into two branches, the Krishna Yajur Veda and the Shukla Yajur Veda. These Vedas actually deals with proses and verses that have been used by priests during Vedic rituals. The fourth Veda refers to the Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda includes hymns, spells, charms, and incantations for healing, protection, and prosperity. Now, these hymns were used and still has importance for the particular things that can be seen in the slide. The Atharva Veda addressed a wider range of topics, and it included medicine, magic, as well as daily life concern. What can be done to deal with any daily life issue could also be overlooked into Atharva Veda. So basically we have four Vedas, the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda, that talks about development of human mind and self, and how can self be constructed, how can self be forced to development of inner self. Now, as we know that self consists of several parts, and inner self is a part where we need to always be constructive so that we work for our further well-being. We are a better human being. Now, what exactly were the contributions, or is still the contribution in an individual's value or belief system, is that the Vedas are a philosophical approach. Philosophical approach, why? Because the texts, the scriptures, they mention guidance. They are a guide to metaphysical assumptions, to cosmological concepts, and towards ethical teachings on how to deal with life concerns, how ethical can we be, and what can be done to improvise these ethics while being followed. Apart from philosophical approach, the approach also contributed as reinforcement. Why? Because with the help of the hymns and the mantras in the Vedas, people could express their devotion, their praise, and they could also, in a way, worship their deities. These mantras reflected cosmology, mythology, as well as spiritual insights of ancient India. So what exactly was going on, what exactly was the belief, is all reflected, and it all guides an individual on how to work upon their value and belief system. Thirdly, the contribution of Vedas is also that it reinforced individuals with help of rituals and yajnas. These rituals and yajnas prescribed elaborate rituals for worship, for sacrifice, and for spiritual purification. These yajnas, these rituals stressed upon the importance of sacrifice and offerings in order to maintain a balance in the cosmic order. So basically, while talking about the Indian value belief system, Vedas had a wonderful contribution by mentioning about how to deal with the issues, with the life concerns, and what can be done to maintain a cosmic order. Though further developments were also done, but again, this was one of the scripture which guided individuals on how to deal with daily life and how to be constructive in their approach. So this was all something that we say about the contribution of Vedas in the value and belief system. Now, I think we can take a break, and then we join you all back in within a time interval. Thank you.
Hello learners, here's a good news for you. Indira Gandhi National Open University is offering an MSc program in Geography in ODL system. So let us have a look at the salient features of this program. First, the program objectives are to enable the learners with a better understanding of Earth and its processes, to orient the learners towards geographical research and to prepare them for current and emerging job opportunities. The target group for this program is graduates in any stream. We have kept the eligibility as graduates in any stream depending on the interdisciplinary nature of the subject. So many school teachers who are looking for career advancement can be benefited from this program. The defense and paramilitary personnel, administrators, policymakers, persons working in NGO and developmental sectors would also be benefited by this program. So, eligibility of this program is graduates in any stream. Medium of instruction is English, so the learners need to give the exam also in English as of now. Minimum duration of the program is 2 years, maximum duration is 4 years. Program fee is Rs 14,000 per annum. That brings a total program fee of Rs 28,000 for the entire program. Total credits is 80 and exam would be annual for the first 2 semesters, and then the learners can give the exam semester wise. There are 13 core theory courses which are compulsory worth 48 credits. 5 are core and compulsory lab courses worth 20 credits. The project or dissertation is of 8 credits and 1 credit is equal to 30 hours of self-study in ODL system. There are 3 elective courses. The learners can choose any one course from 3 elective courses. Each course is of 4 credits. Now coming on to the job prospects. The job prospects can be widespread. It can help in teaching and research, cartography, mapping, urban and regional planning, population and demographic studies, natural resource management, environmental management and sustainability, geospatial analysis, GIS and remote sensing, tourism and recreational industries, administration and marketing, disaster management, transportation and logistic industries. So what are you waiting for? Go to the Samarth portal of IGNOU and take admissions as soon as possible. Alternatively, you can type on Google IGNOU admissions and you will be redirected to the Samarth portal of IGNOU and go and register there and take admissions as soon as possible. In case of any query, you can write to us at satyaraj@ignou.ac.in. Happy learning!
Welcome back to the session. We have been dealing since the beginning today with the course on Fundamentals of Mental Health, which is MPC 051, of the course on PG Diploma in Mental Health. And this particular course deals with the basic development of mind and the basic development of culture and mental health. In this context, we are right now dealing with the first block, which deals with the constituents of mind, the concept of mind, the perspectives of Eastern and Western knowledge system. Now, as a series, we will be talking about the further blocks and the further topics, but in today's session, we are actually dealing with the basis of the Indian knowledge system, the basis of the Indian perspective, the Eastern perspective of concept of mind, and how the development of individuals' values, belief systems were enhanced with the help of the basic texts and scriptures of the Indian knowledge system. Now, this Indian knowledge system refers to the scriptures like Vedas, Upanishads, the Darshanas, the yoga, the medicine, and also the oral stories that were dealt with and that helped individuals to understand, to deal with life, to deal with society, and to live in a constructive way. The actions, karma, the Atman, that is the self, and the universal reality, the universal existence, that is Brahman, were the basic focus of these knowledge system. And the knowledge system like Vedas that we talked about recently in the previous, prior to the break, says that how an individual can deal with life is mentioned with the help of the 4 Vedas, with the hymns, the rituals, the mantras, and the yajnas. Now, after the Vedas, we do need to understand the concept of the Upanishads. The Upanishads is another aspect of the Indian knowledge system, which is actually a collection of ancient philosophical texts that forms the concluding part of the Vedas. In short, they are the summaries of the Vedas. The Upanishads provides spiritual insights towards nature of reality, towards self-awareness, and the ultimate purpose of life, which the text mentions is moksha, the Brahman, as mentioned, the universal existence, the consciousness towards universal existence, and the Atma, that is individual soul. The Upanishads also encourage seekers to transcend mundane existence and to attain spiritual liberation, on how to be liberated with the help of spiritual knowledge. It also emphasizes the importance of inner transformation and realization of the ultimate truth, the truth of existence. It provides guidance on practices like meditation, self-inquiry, that is Atma-vichar, and the devotion, that is bhakti. Now, as we can see that these texts were the basis that gives us guidance on how to work on self, on how to work upon our emotional intelligence, on how to deal with people, on how to be empathetic, and how to analyze self. Self-analysis is a process which helps us towards self-consciousness, towards self-awareness, and also on how to work upon a positive construction of our mind. Now, something that is known as resilience in today's day was also mentioned as information, as a knowledge on how to deal with these issues in a patient way. Now, this all were mentioned in Upanishads, and Upanishads in short was the concluding part of the Vedas. After the Upanishads, the philosophy that we need to understand refers to the Darshanas. The Darshanas, in the context of Darshanas, Samkhya referred to a concept that separated the concept, that delineated the concept of Purush as consciousness, and Prakriti, that is matter, the evolution of universe. It also explained the nature of self and the paths towards liberation, that is the moksha. So basically, it referred about the consciousness, which in Western context referred about the structure of mind. Actually, it was already mentioned in our text, in our scriptures, that how having a consciousness, how our mind works with the help of consciousness, and what is the relevance of universal consciousness. That is, what is the purpose of our life? Why do we exist? And what are the ways with the help of which we can get liberation or further knowledge and further growth? So, this is how it was a guide. It has been a guide. It will be a guide on how to deal with the personal problems, on how to deal with problems with people, on how to interact in the society, and how to exist with an adaptation in the society. After Samkhya, we do need to understand about the yoga. The yogs, the meditation, which is still considered so important. In fact, India has the patent of World International Yoga Day. So in that case, we do need to understand that yoga integrates philosophy with the techniques of self-discipline, meditation, and liberation. Now, with the help of yoga, we understand on how to control on ourselves. We understand on how can we control our emotions, how and when to react with people, how and when what kind of reaction is accepted, or what kind of emotions can be ignored if it is going to harm on ourselves or on our society. Now, prior to this, we also have learned in psychology that our remote control, that is our control of self, should be in our own hand. Now, yoga mentioned about this well in advance, well prior in our previous texts and scriptures. Now it is mentioned on how to get a control on yourself with help of different meditations, with help of different yogas, japs, vrats, and taps. Now these all were actually highlighting on maintaining a self-discipline. After that, we also need to understand about the concept of Vaisheshika, which contributes towards understanding the composition of matter, reality, the cosmic order, with an emphasis on the atomic theory, that is Paramanu, metaphysics, that is Padarth, and causality, that is Karma. So, with the help of these aspects, the Vaisheshika gave an understanding of existence of matters, the elements, and existence of reality, which we do need to understand while we are dealing with any particular concept. The darshanas further also had an inclusion of Nyaya. Nyaya emphasized upon logic. It emphasized upon Praman, the epistemology, and it also maintained a way to establish valid knowledge, and it was based on the logic of theories of inference, that is thinking, coming out with some input, the categories of knowledge, and logical analysis. So logical thinking, something that withhold or just or that could lead to justice. Many systems, regulatory systems, were mentioned in the darshanas. Then after Nyaya, we do need to understand the concept of Mimamsa. Mimamsa mainly refers to interpretation of the Vedic text, that is, the words that have been mentioned in ancient language, the words that are in form of codes can be decoded or understood with the help of Mimamsa. The rituals that could be cracked, that could be understood with the help of Mimamsa, the karma card, and the ethical principles. The principles that can maintain our action in an ethical way. This was mentioned in Mimamsa. It is a guide that directs individuals towards understanding moral duty, the responsibility, ritual efficacy, and the role of scriptures. So this is how Mimamsa was equally important and how it was equally relevant for us to decode the uncoded scriptures. Vedanta focused on the concept of ultimate reality, that is the Brahman, and the individual of self, that is the Atma. It emphasized upon non-dualism, that is Advait Vedanta, dualism, that is Dvait Vedanta, or qualified non-dualism, Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. It significantly contributed towards metaphysics, towards spiritual liberation, that is the moksha and the nature of consciousness. So you can see how things developed, things were mentioned, and the context were actually explained in the text, in the scriptures, prior to further work on concept of mind. Now, consciousness, self-discipline, moral ethics, the justice system, the self-control, the discipline, everything were already mentioned, imbibed, and still needs to be interpreted while dealing with the normal day-to-day life system. Now, while going into darshanas in detail, we also need to see about the Buddha philosophy, which is known as the Buddha Darshana. And this philosophy is majorly known as Buddhism, not only within India, but also outside India, wherever the preachings and the preachers of Siddhartha Gautam spread it. Now, you must have already read about the noble truths, the four noble truths of life that was preached, that was taught by Siddhartha Gautam. Out of these noble truths, the first noble truth was suffering, that individual has to suffer in life. Then, this suffering is not without any cause, like every effect has its cause. So, in that similar way, there are causes of suffering. Then, there requires to be a cessation of suffering, and what exactly is the path to get these suffering terminated or cessated is already mentioned or taught by the Gautam Buddha in the philosophy of Buddhism. Buddhism very nicely mentions the practice of mindfulness. In today's era, we have seen people following mindfulness therapy. There is a psychological therapy which already exists now, which is known as mindful therapy. Now, this therapy tries to make people understand about their spiritual well-being. They make people understand about how to be happy, how to be resilient, how to have patience. These things, how to be mindful, how to be sound. That is, how to be logical while dealing with people, while dealing with society. This all is taught, this all is trained in a mindfulness therapy. Now, this mindfulness concept already was mentioned in the Buddhist philosophy. Now, this practice of mindfulness was already emphasized in the Buddha philosophy. The mindfulness over there referred to the ethical conduct and the mental cultivation for achieving enlightenment, that is nirvana. If an individual wants to attain nirvana, then an individual needs to cultivate ethics, moral principles, and also to construct their mindful thinking. That is, they should have a constructive thinking, and this only can lead an individual to attain nirvana. Now, this mindfulness has been emphasized at the Buddhist philosophy, and now it is still being followed. It is being, in fact, reframed so that an individual gets to know on how to deal with, how to be ethical while dealing with individuals or the society. After Buddha philosophy, we do need to understand about the philosophy of consciousness, self and mind as given by the Jain Darshana. The Jain philosophy, which refers to Jainism, it is propagated to or believed to be propounded by Bhagwan Rishabhdev, that is Bhagwan Mahavira. Now, the particular Jain philosophy emphasized on non-violence, ahimsa, non-possessiveness, aparigraha, and truthfulness, that is satya, as core ethical principles. So you can very well see how the ethical issues and the ethical concerns were already dealt in the Jain philosophy. They talked about if an individual wants to live healthily, if an individual wants to work on their self, and for a context of good sound mental health, an individual need to emphasize on ahimsa, aparigraha, and satya, that is following the life of truthfulness. The Jain philosophy also preached on the existence of multiple eternal substances, that is dravya, the matter, and in these multiple substances they also included soul, that is the individual's soul, jeev, matter, pudgala, and the karma. So everywhere since the beginning, karma or the action was equally given importance to. Now we need to understand that for an healthy individual, we do need to act upon thoughtfully. We do need to solve problems, we need to think creatively, and we also need to develop a good sound mental health. Now these things were already mentioned in the scriptures, and they can very well be referred to if we want to understand the basis of the existence of individual in this universe and how these concepts were actually focusing on the Indian knowledge system. Next to Jainism, the Jain Darshana, we do need to talk about the Charvaka Darshana, that is Lokyata or materialism. Now materialistic, that is one should be materialistic, was being preached over there. This philosophy rejected the existence of supernatural entities. They rejected the existence of souls, the gods, the prates, and they also rejected the concept of afterlife, that is rebirth, or what happens to the soul after life. They in fact focused on empirical observation, and they gave an explanation that was material based. Okay, over here we do need to understand how they actually focused on the materialism. Basically, if we talk about the concept of mind in Ayurveda also, you need to understand that Ayurveda considered 5 basic elements of life that where the mind was composed of. We know about the 5 basic elements: the fire, the water, the air, the ether, and the earth. Now these 5 basic components or elements were also constituted in human mind. This has already been mentioned in the Ayurveda. Coming back to the Charvaka Darshana, it emphasized on actions that might provide pleasure to an individual. That is, if we need to get a pleasure, if we need to be happy, we need to do actions, we need to act accordingly, and the ultimate goal or the primary goal of life would be maximization of the worldly happiness. So this was all mentioned in the Charvaka Darshan. Now, let us talk about what exactly were the contributions of the Indian knowledge system towards our beliefs, our values, and our cultures. Now, talking about ethics and values, these texts, such as Dharma, which mentioned about duty, the righteousness, Ahimsa, that is the non-violence, the Satya, the truth, and Aparigraha, that is non-possessiveness, these texts in a way provided moral guidelines for personal conduct, for social interactions, and for ethical decision making in Indian society. Further, the philosophical perspectives like Nyaya's logic, Vaisheshika's atomism, Samkhya's dualism, Yoga's practice-based approach, Mimamsa's ritualistic interpretations, and Vedanta's non-dualistic and dualistic views provided diverse framework for understanding the nature of reality, consciousness, as well as the ethical conduct that is accepted to be done within the context of society. So those were related to the values and culture related core beliefs. Now, what exactly did it mention in the cultural traditions as well? On the basis of scriptures, the texts, the stories, we also come to know about the legends, the narratives, and also from the epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana, we come to know about what were the ancient cultural traditions, what were the folklore, music, the dance at that time, the art, the literature. And very interestingly, these scriptures also mention that festivals like Diwali, Holi, Navratri, Durga Puja were still celebrated with rituals and ceremonies and are still celebrated. And these festivals are already mentioned in the texts, in the scriptures, many of the scriptures. Now, talking about what exactly was the contribution of the Indian knowledge system towards the mental health, while if you see the philosophical foundations of these texts like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the Bhagavad Gita draw inspiration from Upanishads and Vedanta. They also, the strategies of yoga, the practices of meditation were rooted in these texts, and they reflect upon the physical, mental, and spiritual benefits. So basically, they were actually a guide on how to develop on your mental health. Apart from mental health, they also contributed towards the development of self and the concept of self. Upanishads provide deeper understanding towards the nature of reality, towards the knowledge of self, the knowledge of ultimate truth. So this is how it creates an interlink between reality, self, truth. And the concepts of self which were emphasized in these contexts were Brahman, universal consciousness, Atma, individual self, karma, the laws of cause and effect. That is what if something is leading to an effect, there is a cause behind each effect. That is, each karma is based on our actions. It also talked about moksha, that is the liberation, which has profoundly shaped the spiritual worldview of millions of people in India. So these contexts actually gave a guidance on what is the reality, what is the relevance of self, and how can self be equally interrelated, how he or she can work accordingly so that they have good actions to how do they enact in a good ways to get equal karma or the effect of those actions. Now, IKS, the Indian knowledge system, also had a very influential contribution on the learning concept. That is, these texts are actually the basis of our rich intellectual tradition. As mentioned to you earlier, that these texts already mentions the concept of mind, concept of consciousness, resilience, patience, ethics, moral principles, and how to deal with individuals. The teachings also reflect the Guru Shishya Parampara, which actually encourages the context of critical thinking, debate, and scholarly inquiry. Right now also, when people are doing researches, when people are taking guidance, they are actually getting a direction on how to think constructively. So the Guru Shishya Parampara existed in previous society also, and this gave an importance of how things can be constructively developed on basis of discussion, on basis of guidance and directions. Further, these texts were the subjects of interpretation. There were philosophical dialogues, discourse, which contributed to the development of, further contributed to the development of Indian philosophical schools and thought systems. These particular knowledge system serve as foundational texts because they guide us towards learning and sustaining Indian cultural and religious practices. And prior to that, as I was also talking about the 5 basic elements of which exist in this world, and our mind consists of these five basic elements, was a part of the concept of mind in Ayurveda. Ayurveda mentions that air, which is one of the existential element in this world, it exists in the inner mind as underlying mental sensitivity, and it is the background for the vibratory field of energies, habits, and tendencies that sustains the mind. So air is considered to be a part of inner mind. Fire, it is considered to be a part of intermediate mind, which deals with the rationality, which deals with logical understanding and discriminating the different concepts. Water, it is consisting in the outer mind, which is emotional, which deals with emotions, which talks about our ability to connect with the external world. Then the element of earth exists in mind as ego. The ego, which motivates us to behave in a particular way, which guides us on what to do and what not to do. And the ether, it exists in mind, in the underlying mind space. It gives a background capacity for all mental functions. Basically, these aspects have been mentioned in the concept of mind in the field of Ayurveda. Now, apart from these, 3 doshas have equally been given importance while talking about the concept of mind in traditional knowledge. The 3 doshas, as we know, Vata dosh, Pitta dosh, and Kapha doshas are the elements or the concepts which combine to create certain doshas. For example, Vata dosha is an amalgamation of Vata, that is the ether, and the air. Now, if an individual has Vata doshas, it actually influences the nerve impulses, the blood circulation, respiration. The Pitta dosha is an amalgamation of fire and water, and it leads to the process of transformation or metabolism. Kapha dosha is a combination of water and earth, and it is responsible for growth, for adding structure to our mind unit by unit. So the 3 doshas are somehow connected, and they are actually leading to certain or the other aspects of mind. So, and apart from that, there is also mentioning of 3 gunas, the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas, which are a part of mind. So this is how the concept of mind was also discussed has also been discussed in our Indian Ayurvedic system. So this is all about the information that we have discussed today. The basics that we discussed today was about the characters, the meaning of Indian knowledge system, its characteristic features, its relevance, the different concepts, the different kind of what were the context, what were the basis, the texture, the scriptures that explained these concept of mind, the aspects of our Indian knowledge system, the values, the teachings, and what were the contributions, what is still the contribution of our Indian knowledge system towards development of our mind, our values, our belief system, our self-development, and our learning system. So this is all for today's session. I meet with you with a new topic related to this particular course in another session. Till then, thank you. Take care.